Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is the fourth session in our Games Insight Month here at Yuki. Very pleased to have Nick Hellis from Theorycraft Marketing here to talk to us about everything to do with games marketing in terms of trends, tactics, benchmarks for 2025. So, Nick, without further ado, do you want to sort of introduce yourself and what this session will hope to achieve?
Yeah, no, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining as well. I just seen that we've got quite a few people on this, so I'm hoping that you're going to get some good insights and things from us. Essentially, yeah, we're going to talk about. We've been doing a little bit of a dig into some of our campaign data and things in terms of paid media campaigns and things like that for gaming. So in particular, mobile, PC, console. And yeah, we've kind of I wanting to give a little bit of an insight into if you haven't really looked at marketing yet, or if you're just looking at dipping your toes, or even if you're running campaigns now, kind of looking at benchmarks and data on sort of based on a lot of campaigns that we run before. So hopefully we can provide some insight. Obviously, if you've got questions, we can answer them as well. I don't think the actual presentation will last. Well, I think it definitely won't last the full hour. So we'll get some questions and have a little chat about that as well. But yeah, from a marketing agency point of view, we're kind of hoping to give some wisdom on pass that on from actual data and things that we've collected. So no, looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks again for having us on. And yeah, I can dive right in unless there's any more sort of anything else you wanted to cover. But
Yeah, I think you should dive straight in, I reckon.
sounds good. Awesome. Well, as I was saying earlier when we were checking, we're using Canva for this, so I'm hoping it's all going to stand up and it's all gonna go smoothly. But bear with me if it's a little bit slow and reacting, or there's. I know we've got a few videos and GIFs and stuff, so hopefully that will go all right. But yeah, we'll dive right in. Again, thanks again for joining. I'm gonna go kind of a brief introduction about, as I say, what this is, who's it for, and as well, kind of just outlining what we're gonna run through. As I say, it's not a massively long presentation, but it's got a lot of data, a lot of detail, and a lot of like information in it. So um, what we can do is either send this deck, or we've got an actual report that we've compiled that we can send over that's got the numbers and the data on it as well. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed with all the different sort of data there is on here. This is more of a summary of it and a discussion into different sort of channels and the performance of that within gaming. So as it says here, yeah. So over the course of around about 9 years or so, we're kind of drawing on that experience from over sort of $10 million worth of media spend across different kinds of campaigns, so across mobile, PC, console, across all genres. As you can see here, from a load of different types of games, different size budgets. So whether it's four figures to seven figures or anything like that. So we kind of experienced in running different size campaigns. So it's not necessarily like, for the big spenders or anything like that. This can be useful for anyone along that sort of ecosystem. And hopefully this can help developers, marketers, or anyone to help plan and optimize their campaigns. So if, as I said before, if you haven't run campaigns before, if you're looking at sort of dipping your toes in marketing, then this will give you a little bit of a direction to that. And if you're running campaigns and really experienced in that, then I'm hoping then it can uncover some insights, or at least start a conversation about sort of, what you've experienced and stuff like that. Because, I can't stress enough that these are just kind of baseline numbers, baseline sort of benchmarks and stuff that we've seen. Some people might have better or worse performing campaigns in specific areas, or see specific cost per clicks or CPMs that are different as well. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation that we can have. So as I said, like I hope, whatever capacity you're joining today, you'll find it useful. So developers or publishers or marketing managers within these companies, or media buyers or ad agencies or anything like that. So yeah, I'm hoping it'll be useful for everybody. So briefly going over what we're gonna run through. I'll look through, so I'll go outline each individual channel, so like Meta, X, Reddit, and all of that. So the key channels that we see within our media mix, and kind of go over them a little bit, not in too much detail, but enough to be able to get a good insight. Then kind of look at ad costs per genre, so break that down a little bit. Again, there's a lot of information in that one in particular that might not be relevant for you, or necessarily like there's basically a lot of detail. So we've done a kind of a summary of that as well, but I'll be going through that, and some creative insights, because obviously that's a massively important aspect of paid media and marketing is the creative you're using. And then based on all of that stuff, the conclusions and any recommendations as well. So some tips, some tactics and things that we see, and trends that we can see currently. And then we've got my contact details as well. But if you need to like nip off before the end of this, at the end of this deck, like just get in contact on LinkedIn, or my email, or just type us in on Google, and get in touch via the website. Um, I completely understand that not a lot of people, sometimes you don't have a full hour to spend. So appreciate the time that you do spend with me on this. But if you have to dip off, then just, yeah, feel free to message me. Um, I'll really quickly go through us as a company, Theorycraft Marketing at a glance. Like, this can be your excuse to finish your email or get a coffee if you need. It won't be too long, but it's just a little brief introduction into us as a company to give a bit of context as to what we do and why we know this kind of stuff. And hopefully it'll be kind of interesting. So essentially, what we do is we focus mostly on performance focused marketing. So looking at the data, looking at specific conversion focused campaigns as well. So measuring conversions through specific tech partners across PC, console, VR, and mobile campaigns. So we really focus on that acquisition and those performance indicators that are meaningful to a game, which is why we kind of thought maybe we could use that data, we could use that information to present and hopefully help other companies. Yeah, we've done a lot of different talks. This is actually the first presentation of this specific sort of data set and report. Normally, like before, we've helped sort of indies or solo devs or anything, like help them build out a marketing plan, look at recommendations on how they can kind of approach publishers or even investors with their marketing plans, and show them how they've thought about it. But this is the first sort of time we're looking at this report in particular. So that's quite exciting. As I said before, we've worked with a load of different ranges of companies. So, recently worked with 11-bit on Frostpunk 2, worked with Crafton on PUBG, and a load of like Arte with their sort of indie label of games as well. So there's a load of different sort of experience we have with different types of games. So we'll begin now with looking at each individual channel and their performance and kind of what they're strong for, and going a little bit and like recommending when to use them and why. And it's, as I said before, you might see different results from your campaigns if you've got a lower CPM or anything like that, or a higher CPM. Then that's interesting, and this is kind of focused on the campaigns you've run as a whole. So, conversion optimized campaigns, traffic optimized campaigns, that all of these different things get different costs. So this is kind of an amalgamation of everything. So start with Meta. Obviously this slide showing up. Sorry, is that slide? Oh, here we go. Sorry, it's taking a bit of time to load from my side, but
yeah, it's just, oh no, there we go. That's better.
well, it's okay. Sorry, it's taking a time to load from my side, but just give me a shout if the slide isn't loaded all right, because it's a bit temperamental from my side. But Yeah, looking at Meta, obviously across Facebook and Instagram, as well as audience network. Generally, this is kind of one of the top paid media channels that we see in our media plans and that we plan with. Generally, because it's really excels in user acquisition. So whether it's through like AI driven targeting or as we can see here, there's a lot of different targeting types. So whether it's demographic, lookalike audience is also a massive sort of pull towards this channel as well. The first party data you can get from it and use and utilize is really second to none really on Meta. So generally average sort of you can get a higher CPM costs because of the granularity of targeting, but generally this is kind of like a decently sort of average sort of channel for CPM costs and cost per click as well, seeing around 50 cents. I'm aware that I guess everyone in this group is works in GBPs and not in dollars, but I think for the overall sort of ease of for everyone understanding when we do this. So we kind of just put everything in dollars because it tends to be across the, what we work with. So around 50 cents cost per click on an average. It is a good cost per click driver. You do tend to see lower than that, but depending on what optimized campaigns you're running. But as I say, the targeting options are pretty good in terms of first party targeting here. And another thing that we're highlighting per channel is kind of the desktop and mobile split, because what we tend to recommend, I'm kind of assuming most of you are kind of interested in the PC console element of marketing rather than mobile in particular, and we will cover a little bit of mobile as well. But when we're looking at PC console, we tend to look at the better performing channels when it comes to, desktop focused inventory, because, the path to conversion from a desktop is obviously a lot easier, from click even to wish list to download and playing the game. Obviously from desktop, the conversion funnel is much easier and it's much more attractive. So we tend to see higher conversion rates through desktop focused channels. So that's why it's kind of interesting for us to put forward, what the split is generally. And as you know, with Instagram, it's a mobile focused channel. So Meta, Facebook is obviously a little bit more focused on desktop, but it's worth noting anyway. And here again, as I say, on each channel we've kind of put a little bit of a example as to what that looks like in the sort of ecosystem of Meta. If you haven't run it before, if you haven't seen it before, then it's kind of a good idea, a good sort of a good I guess standpoint for that. And these are ads that we've run before for some of our clients. So next, I'll go on to X. Again, this is we've seen fewer requests for ads on X, and we've seen less budget go towards X. But looking at CPMs, you tend to, especially in the US, the CPMs seem to be higher in the US compared to other sort of maybe European and other regions. But overall, that's kind of a little bit more expensive CPM costs. But cost per clicks can be cheaper purely because of their audience network. So if you don't know, then if you advertise on X, you're not just advertising on the platform, you're advertising across their whole audience network, which is, on apps, on websites and stuff like that. So that kind of brings the cost per click down. You might want to exclude the sort of the X audience, or I don't know what they call it now, but it was the Twitter audience network. If you want to purely serve traffic on the X platform, but that kind of brings the cost per click down. But that would bring the cost per click up. Sorry. But we do see still a strong sort of engagement metric for X. As you know, mostly mobile focused channel, which is why we're steering budgets a little bit away from this. But depending on what your target is, what your KPI is, if you want to, leverage those interest-based sort of communities and drive discussion and stuff and look at engagement, then it is a really strong channel for that. And as you can see, like within the targeting as well, you can target specific keywords and follow a lookalike. So you can get really granular with this, more granular than you can with Meta. So keyword targeting, and follower lookalikes. For example, if have you have a list of similar games or similar companies, you can plug their Twitter accounts into your targeting sort of criteria, and it'll sort of look at that audience and then match that with other people across the sort of X platform. So it'll target your ads towards people that are similar to that. So that's a really interesting feature. And then obviously like custom audiences and using retargeting and on your own followers and things like that, like with Facebook is really useful.
We have had a couple of sort of relevant questions in the chat,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah.
Um, I mean, there's sort of a little bit of a question around sort of granularity. Is there sort of data on sort of cost per install or anything more sort of granular than cost per click and CPM as well?
So in terms of this, like we did look at sort of seeing if we get cost per installs and maybe cost per wish lists and stuff on this, but it's so we've got to be careful with kind of giving that because it's so dependent on on the quality of the game, the audience, or the even time of the year and the time of launch and stuff like that. It's really difficult to say, okay, this is going to get X amount of cost per wish list or X amount of cost per install with per channel. It is something that if you kind of if we have a conversation and learn more about your game and sort of and we can kind of give a little bit more of an insight onto that, but we're generally quite cautious about giving cost per wish list or cost per installs. Like we, for example, we do work, we do measure those and we see cost per wish lists of anywhere between $1 or sort of $10 or $10 to $15 or whatever it is, if it doesn't perform well. So we can really kind of we can look upon data on that, but yeah, it's very kind of it's just very dependent on the game, so it's quite difficult to do that as a blanket one. But it's a conversation that we can have. And sorry, sorry, Oscar, yeah, I'm just looking at your messages now about attribution tools. Yeah, completely. Yeah, we use all the major attribution tools, Steam Data Suite, Gamesite, Kochava, and I know that as well. We use like AppsFlyer and things like that I know that can plug it does mostly used for mobile, but plugs into PC console as well. And there's another one called Tracks as well that actually is quite an interesting one that we're gonna be trying as well. So we're kind of looking at plugged into these to optimize towards that. But yeah, some of these mobile sort of MMPs and tracking platforms have kind of introduced the PC, PC or Steam sort of attribution aspect to it, but they don't kind of weirdly they don't really shout about it that much because they're so focused on mobile. And also the UTM sort of the UTM. So I'm just trying to read it the messages um while I comment. But yeah, the UTM links on Steamworks as well. We use that, but it's not necessarily as it's not as trustworthy. Not trustworthy, but it's not as sufficient as these other platforms where you can directly attribute, and you can even send postbacks back, like with Steam Data Suite, for example, looking at postbacks actually to yeah. Chocolate teapot's a good way of putting it, and but it's kind of good for getting a really base knowledge of it, but because there's so much tracking drop off when it comes to browser to Steam, then it's just it's not worth following completely because you completely ruin campaigns if you just judge it on that. But it's at least a start for Steamworks, bless them. So yeah, we'll see what they end up developing. Um, so is that all good, or did you have any other questions? Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think I mean there's also some questions around what sort of geographic locations these are around. Is this sort of global or is it localized or across both?
Yeah,
Out
so
of
this is
curiosity.
mostly so this is across basically mostly our campaigns are across kind of Europe and US. So this is mostly where they're from, as I say, with X, like when you are looking even more granular into geos and regions, obviously, like, you know, US is tends to be more expensive for expert, for example, and you end up counting like tier one countries and tier two and stuff like that. So you do see a difference between, lower tier countries in terms of how they're defined within paid media. So more like Eastern European or something like that, or even like Egypt, for example, seems to be a really cost-effective market that has the scale. And sort of Southeast Asia as well when we're looking at that. But most of this is based on US and Europe, because yeah, most Southeast Asia, sort of those countries would bring it down a lot, and it tends to be where we see most appetite for campaigns tend to be sort of US Europe based. But yeah, it's completely, as I say, it's completely dependent on game, it's dependent on audience and region and stuff. So yeah, there'll be, if we break it down by geo as well, it'll be a never ending presentation maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, last one for now, I suppose. Just through the chat here. I mean, obviously, algorithms for X or Twitter sort of change quite frequently. I mean, are these figures over the course of the entire campaign? Do they sort of? I'm assuming there's sort of fluctuations throughout the lifespan of the campaign. What sort of timescale are we talking here for these numbers?
In terms of the actual campaign data we use, this it's so with X in particular, there's obviously been a lot of change recently, which has caused a lot less budget to go towards that from our perspective anyway, because it's just not as the performance we've seen has not been as good, and also account management is terrible. So if there is an issue with anything, then you can't get in touch with anyone. But anyway, the span of these campaigns is around about sort of, this is based on around about sort of 2 or 3 years of data. So yeah, it can change pretty quickly in terms of what CPM costs and things are, but generally that's still relatively relevant. I think X is probably the one that's changed, I guess, in terms of how it operates the most. But yeah, and in terms of campaign wise, like CPM fluctuation depends on the amount of spend you're putting towards, like, if you optimize campaigns and stuff, you can bring CPMs down, or if you're optimizing towards CPMs, then you can bring it down. But generally it doesn't fluctuate too much when you're running, because you don't generally run CPM optimized campaigns, especially if it's that performance focused, cost per install campaign, for example, or wishlist campaign. So it tends to stay pretty steady, and then maybe cost per click changes because you're optimizing more towards lower funnel. But yeah, again, it kind of depends.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Yeah, I'll feel free to crack on.
Thank you. Awesome. So yeah, X, I think I finished X. But essentially, just to kind of, I guess, summarize that, it's still a channel that we see in the media mix, with the granularity of the audience and what you can target. But I think it's really good for sort of that more hype driven campaigns and kind of live service games as well, that are more sort of agile, and you can kind of try and get build that community and engagement, really. So it kind of keeps that conversation going. Next up, it should be onto Reddit now. Yeah. So yeah, next up, Reddit. This is a channel that we kind of see a little bit more budget going towards now, and a little bit more appetite for when it comes to marketing campaigns. Again, when we look at targeting, it's got interest targeting, it's got device location, everything like that we normally see across all social platforms, but as well keyword and the subreddit kind of community targeting is probably where it's most useful for, and that we see is really good, where we can build out a list of however many 10, 50, 100 or whatever sort of subreddits, and sort of enter that conversation. CPM tends to be what we've seen lower than X and Meta overall. Generally, there's no specific, I mean, for targeting that is so niche, sometimes the CPM is pretty achievable. It's pretty good value. So you can leverage those, as I said, those communities and those discussions and the ad formats. So you can do promoted posts. You can go into conversation placements and things like that. You can buy, you know, full homepage takeovers and stuff. But when you're buying on the ad platform, you can enter kind of these conversations and use a little bit of different creatives as well, like maybe if you wanted to use less salesy focused messages and more screenshots of games and conversation focused, it's quite good for that as well. And you can also have a good sort of scale within desktop inventory as well, seeing as there's quite a decent sort of chunk of audience that still uses on desktop. And onto TikTok. I think it's an interesting conversation in terms of TikTok and obviously the mobile heavy nature of that. We have run campaigns on TikTok that are pushing to wish lists and things, and we have seen some performance. We have seen some wish list uptake. We are nervous about putting too much budget towards that for PC console, whether at a performance focused level. It is for an awareness channel. It's obviously when talking about PC console, high impact media channel. So you've got the whole screen. You've got pretty impactful chance to get someone's full attention. It's kind of short form video, so it's kind of looking at that trend at the moment of short form video and looking at sort of trend driven virality. So something can spread pretty quickly and pretty easily on TikTok, even from an organic point of view. An interactive format. So like this is more mobile focused, but playable ads, Spark ads, for example. That's amazing for installs and engagement there. So we see a lot of mobile, obviously a lot of mobile traffic and the mobile ad buying on TikTok and more awareness sort of focused for PC console really. But as I say, it's not a main channel we see for a wish list or for sort of user acquisition channel across desktop. But I should say that the actual cost per click in terms of the engagement on TikTok and the CPM levels, it's still relatively good value in terms of the engagement that you get, the video views you get, the CPMs you get. It's still good value if you want to sort of, if that is your goal.
We've had an interesting question from Oscar Clark here.
Yeah.
In terms of obviously everything that's been going on with TikTok in politics, if we can cast our mind back to the beginning of the year, have you seen that that's impacted massively on sort of its usefulness as a marketing tool in the last sort of 2 or 3 months at all, perhaps? Is it hard to say at this point in time, maybe?
I mean, like the most recent times, I don't think it's specific. I mean, it affects the kind of credibility of the channel and things, but I think there's still decent communities on TikTok, especially in gaming, really. Like I know that it's dwindling in terms of its credibility and its newsworthy credibility, but when it comes to spreading information about your game and building those audiences, there's still a value there. But as I say, like it is dropping. It is the platform we're seeing less, and also the fact that you've got to be verified to even run ads on it anyway is kind of even a barrier towards some companies and some games, which is just not sit well with with a lot of people. But I think it's more to do with the kind of since the takeover. I don't know even how was it 2 years ago, or I can't remember how long ago it was. A few years ago, the takeover. I think ever since then it's been slowly sort of dwindling a little bit in terms of performance, in terms of credibility and things like that. But as I say, like a lot of smaller studios and a lot of solo devs still do rely on Twitter to sort of engage that conversation. But maybe it's kind of time to to look at not relying on that too much and looking elsewhere at platforms, like Reddit, which I'm sure they've already looked at anyway, but and Discord and things like that.
Sure. Wonderful. Yeah, no, please feel free to talk about YouTube.
They're all good. No, sorry, it's really some really interesting messages going on in the group, which I'm trying not to read and to try not to like because I think it'd be good to have conversations sort of away from this as well. That'll be really interesting to have. But some really cool messages. So keep that coming through and have that discussion within yourselves. That's awesome. I'm trying not to get distracted by them because I'll go off on tangents, but keep on having that. That's awesome. Um, so yeah, YouTube. Again, like we see this more as like an overall kind of powerhouse in terms of gaming marketing in particular. Whether it is covering awareness, whether it's covering performance as well. We do see that the performance there, pretty stable and pretty good. Whether it's cost per click, as I say here, is relatively is is relatively even with Meta and everything and CPMs as well. But we see the targeting possibilities for YouTube in particular, and the presence of gaming within YouTube and the audiences you can get there is more prevalent, like more prevalent there. So high intent targeting. You can succeed on YouTube with short form videos, but also longer form if you need to have like a sequential video campaign and introducing more content there. So there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of content. Um, and it's also quite high it's a high intent targeting as well. So you can target keywords as well, conversation topics like topics and things like that. You can even go as granular as targeting by YouTube channel, YouTube video, for example, and build out a list of specific channels that you want to target, as well as using first party data if you've got email lists and stuff like that, or looking at lookalikes as well for that. Um, and yeah, as I say, you can use premium ad formats. So you can use TrueView, which is just optimized towards those longer form, sort of more valuable views, as well as shorts and bumper ads, which is kind of quick and engage within those sort of 3 to 6 seconds of attention. And as well, focused relatively good split across desktop and mobile inventory there as well. We've run a lot of campaigns that are purely desktop focused YouTube campaigns, which we still see a lot of scale and good performance with. Um, Kind of on similar theme, going on to Google Display, a little bit less focus here specifically on gaming and performance as much. So we don't really tend to see this as more of a sort of first point sort of performance focused campaign. Maybe if you're using retargeting, then it could be lower funnel activity. But when we're looking at display, you can get sort of relatively good CPM because of the broad nature of targeting you can get. You can get a lot of scale with it, which also keeps the CPM down. Relatively higher cost per click. People kind of maybe there's an element of sort of banner blindness and stuff like that if upon first touch point, but you still kind of see it. You still see engagement, whether it's further down the funnel engagement on if it's an awareness campaign, then obviously not. But you can get pretty dynamic creative formats for that. So HTML5, for example, moving ads and things that sort of flash and all that stuff. You can get a little bit creative with it. But I'd say it's mostly used for re-engaging. So you can re-engage lapsed players. You can use first-party data to be able to, upload that. Not necessarily even Google Display, but other ad networks like StackAdapt, for example. That's just basically the same display network, and you can sort of retarget Facebook impressions or people that have seen a specific ad and retarget them on their favorite, whatever website they're browsing. But it's less of a channel we see really within gaming, unless it's really highly in sort of strategic, I'd say. Um, Going on to Twitch, I don't know if how many of you kind of thought about advertising on Twitch or even have advertised on Twitch, in terms of a paid perspective. It's obviously pretty immersive in terms of the gaming, audience, and specifically sort of first-person shooters or sort of engaging. Even horror games is quite performs well on here. But like giving access, as I say, to that dedicated gaming audience is pretty useful. You can run video ads, homepage takeovers, banner ads, and things like that. The only thing is it's just extremely expensive CPM, especially when and cost per click. Like the thing is with Twitch is that people don't really want to exit Twitch when they're on Twitch. They want to stay engaged with it. So more of an awareness channel, really, that we've seen that we've used it for, or to generate views, to generate awareness. Stuff like this, like PUBG esports, for example, generate awareness and views of their sort of tournament on Twitch. Stuff if you want to direct, advertise something that you're doing on Twitch, or even if you want to do an influencer partnership and put that on Twitch and on paid ads, then yeah. But a lot of it now, since now they're owned by Amazon, they look at, you have to buy them either direct buys through them, and you have to like do a minimum spend of like $15,000, for example, in some geos. So it is a little bit expensive and a high barrier to entry. So it tends to be only for those larger scale campaigns. I'm aware that we're kind of, what's the time now? So okay, so I'll try and go a little bit quicker over these because and so we can get to a little bit more down the line. But yeah, Opera GX, we've run a few campaigns for this in particular. We've seen cost per click of around about $1. Can be quite useful if you kind of, this is more of a kind of I guess more of a niche audience of like proper gamers, as you would say. So as I said, like that desktop inventory is good here. If you're looking like we did, for example, Frostpunk 2 campaign, we saw a kind of a good correlation between Opera GX users and Frostpunk 2 players. So it kind of made sense for that. But we don't see a lot of campaigns towards this. But if it's something that interests you, then you do that direct buy. So you speak to the guys, you negotiate sort of prices and CPM. So it's it ranges from like $1 to $15, for example, depending on what placement you want. But we do see sort of a relatively good sort of click through for tech savvy gamers that are kind of in that environment. And Google search briefly, like we don't do a massive amount of Google search campaigns in gaming, but it's really good for sort of lower funnel activity. So when you already have awareness of your game, when people know about it, or even existing players, you can retarget them through a really high intent sort of campaign. So people that are actively searching your game or a similar game, you can kind of either piggyback off their success. If it's another game that's been released that is similar to yours, that's massive, then you can kind of use their keyword in a paid campaign and kind of bid on their keywords to kind of get a paid acquisition on that. So there's tactics you can do, but as you know, like it's not a highly visual context. So what your game is good at is the visuals of it and showing it off in that way. So it's difficult to catch someone's attention through that. But if they already know about your game, then you can kind of re-energize those players or even convert them finally through that lower funnel, because when you can capture those players actively searching for your games or updates or in-game content, then it's really good for driving lower funnel activity. And I think it's penultimate one in terms of this section. I'd say, looking at paid influencers. Something we do a lot with is paid influencers along with organic sort of outreach. But when we're looking at paid influencers, generally CPM tends to be, that much higher in terms of $85, for example, roughly, depending on the size. So if it's like a nano, micro, macro, or anything like that, you can engage those sort of communities and drive awareness, or even installs and wish lists through there if you get the right ones. It's all about finding those right ones. That's why it ranges so much. You could get some content out on a a nano creator, for example, and then it can go viral or whatever, or it can get picked up by a bigger creator from some of those smaller creators' paid outreach. So it just really depends, and obviously CPM is at a premium because you know that's just how that industry is, and that they can demand that money because they know that you want them to play their game, and if you want to pay them, then they want to get paid. um, then yeah, finally, kind of a little bit on the kind of the sort of native stores. It's, as I say, it's mostly for larger scale campaigns when you're looking at sort of TPM cost, really from $12 to $35, and depending on what cost per thousand, like depending on what placement you choose, it tends to be a more premium option. Pretty good, obviously, for console promotion. Depends on again, depends on kind of time of year, other releases, a little bit on that. But if you wanted to run an awareness campaign on there, then it kind of it completely makes sense, and you can judge it on sort of cost per click at $2 is relatively expensive. Obviously because of the CPM being so high, it just drives costs up. And in terms of your targeting options, relatively limited, but you can still sort of target sort of demographics and game genre, which kind of is a decent sort of a decent way of doing it. Yeah, so now I'll go and kind of a little bit of insight by genre. Again, this is kind of this this data is pretty granular, but again, it kind of taken with a pinch of salt because there's so many different variables and so many different things like that. So we've kind of tried to break it down and give a little bit of insight as much as possible. Um, yeah, so like campaigns can be unpredictable sometimes as well. So it's kind of an interesting thing that we can just have. That's a good discussion and we can see. So we've kind of got a little bit of a heat map here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of this and everything because we've got a few slides that just summarizes it anyway. So this is something we can send over, but I kind of like the main focus of this, or the main sort of output of this is kind of looking at, I guess you can see that Google search is low cost per click, but that's kind of because it's the highest intent traffic and it's people that, so there's not as much scale for Google search, for example. You can see console stores as a channel being much more expensive, as I said before. It's a higher barrier to entry, it's a higher CPM. So there's generally not a massive amount when it comes to different genres. We're kind of really looking at really niche sort of looking at differences there. But when it comes to cost per click and cost CPM, like because there's so many different variables in terms of, as I said many times, like geos, time of year, quality of game, even like that, then there's so many variables that it's difficult to really pin this down. But we've tried based on the data that we have. And kind of this is kind of a little bit easier to kind of go over. Again, I won't go all of this. We've got a slide next that goes into more key points, but basically kind of when you're looking at more hyper casual audiences, because they're more broad, it means you can reach these for a little bit cheaper, and you can sort of just do a bit more of a spread net if that's kind of your strategy. When you compare that for like a VR audience, for example, it's a smaller audience, it's a more niche, higher cost to find these and to engage these. They are out there, but yeah, it depends on what costs and what kind of the broad nature of the audience. Also with something like horror and survival, relatively kind of trending, I guess now, and but still niche, but really has a higher engaged audience. So we've seen that people are pretty engaged with that sort of survival game and either comment or click through tends to be a high percentage. And something like a simulation and sandbox audience, appeals to more creative audiences. So people that play maybe have a longer session, longer session players. So kind of depend the kind of influences what creatives use. So maybe user creatives that kind of reflect that and reflect the sort of being a bit more creative in that sense. But in terms of the trends and the main points we see, as I said before, with the VR and niche titles, tends to be sort of more unpredictable, but because it's a smaller audience, tends to be higher costs. But when you're looking at sort of competitive games like first-person shooters and those types of games, RPGs. Sometimes when there's a strong either strong competition or even there's a strong, you can a lot of these games monetize their players in terms of like in-game purchases and use that for look at higher value players. So it tends to be sometimes if you're optimizing towards high value players or higher spenders, then you're going to pay more for more cost per click and higher CPMs in that sense. And yeah, in terms of mobile games, if there's you're probably aware that these tend to have the lowest ad costs when looking at sort of obviously onboarding and stuff like that, but obviously face higher competition and a higher churn rate when it comes to you know their lower value audiences, for example. So that's probably something to be expected. Um, in terms of creative insights, I'll go a little bit into stuff that we've seen and experienced, and then and a little bit of some examples as well. But yeah, essentially, every game is its own creative. So your campaigns depend on your creatives because that does most of the heavy lifting realistically is how you present your game and what creative you're using and how you can really attract them within the first sort of 3 seconds of the ad. So we can see like top line, as you probably know, short form video, so 6 to 15 seconds, depending on what platform you're on. On platforms like TikTok, Meta, even YouTube Shorts and stuff, really dominates the engagement and even the spend when you put different placements and different creatives on. You see the kind of algorithms tend to lean more towards these creatives. Also looking at sort of creator-led, influencer-led content, like that can show someone playing your game and actually use them as your paid media campaigns can be really perform really well. We're doing a lot of at the moment. But also looking at static in for example, in these examples, static ads or carousel ads that aren't big sort of cinematic videos or big sexy video ads, but more so using them as retargeting and supporting assets for your hero video or for your trailer, following them up with with a retargeting banner or something like that can really kind of like trigger that conversion. There's a couple of examples here. I'm not sure if the sound is going to play, but kind of I thought it'd be nice to just introduce some examples here that we saw perform quite well. There's an example from obviously from Green Hell that we saw. I don't know if the sound, but I don't think the sound's too important necessarily. But it's just interesting to have that sort of short form video with an end card as well. This is that has that CTA as well, and that normally we like to have we have in the first 3 seconds or so that actually to know what the game is. For example, in here with Vermintide 2, when we did these ads, it obviously has the logo clearly there. We can't kind of take for granted people knowing the game. So kind of action packed sort of in-game. So yeah, as you can see again with that with the end card and a bit more action packed and I mean, to be honest, with the Vermintide one, we had some issues with like blood and stuff within the ads, and Google had some issues with that and stuff. So you've got to be careful with that. But yeah, some kind of examples, some examples there, and then some brief. This might be the slide where it goes a little bit laggy, but we'll give it a go. It's just got a couple more examples of sort of the more vertical formats as well. If you've just got those sort of landscape videos, there is a way of sort of adapting that into vertical with the logo and then a sort of CTA at the bottom as well. You don't have to have the video covering the whole thing. There's just some examples there. Again, we can send this over, or I can send this to you if you reach out, but I kind of want to skip over this so it doesn't freeze my whole computer. Um, sorry, this might just trying to get onto the next slide while this figures it out. If there's any more questions or anything, I can.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. So whilst waiting for the slide to load, going back to the sort of influencers side of things, Oscar's mentioned drop.me or dared drop.
Mm.
I don't, have you come across these at all? These are relatively new to me, actually. I've not come across them in terms of. It sounds like they're platforms that allow sort of challenges to be disseminated to streamers or nano streamers, micro streamers, that sort of thing.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry, there was a video playing on my laptop. I was trying to frantically stop, and it was.
That's all right. It's okay. Oscar's mentioned drop.me or dared drop. There seem to be sort of platforms that sort of provide specific in-game actions for nano and micro streamers to perform. Have you come across this at all?
I don't think so. Dare drop, you say?
Dared, Dared,
Um,
drop. Um,
no, I don't
yeah.
think it's interesting to look at that. I remember I'm speaking to a couple of companies that do kind of that reward
Mm.
based kind of campaigns where you can. Well, thank you for the URLs that are kind of focused on. I think that's more focused on like generating points. So you sign up to this, the creator signups, and then you can kind of earn points based on what activities are done, whether it's like a certain amount of hours of gameplay, a certain like uh, even following on Twitter, posting on Twitter, and all of that stuff. Then that's a good way of engaging creators and getting them to the sort of next stage of engagement. I think I spoke to another company that are doing. I can't remember if it's like under NDA or not, so I won't mention the actual name, but they're doing a program where creator signs up and they kind of the more hours they stream and play of the game, the more prizes they win that they can give out to their community, and it kind of like it's kind of it rolls on from there. So I think it's a really cool way of engaging creators and giving them something in return without having to pay them a ton of money. But I'll definitely check that
That's
out.
absolutely fine. Yeah, there are a couple more questions sort of further down the line, but perhaps be worth sort of looking at your next slide, and we can ask these questions towards the end.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm aware that it's kind of it's getting later now. So I'll fire through these. Should be not long now, and then see if anyone's around for questions, we can do that as well. But yeah, I've managed to navigate those laggy slides. I'll skip the last examples as well, but hopefully they should be good for now. So yeah, briefly some conclusions and some sort of basically some summaries of what we've spoken about really is kind of you really need to kind of maximize your ad budget by looking at strategic allocation of that budget. So different creatives and looking at that performance analysis. So prioritizing sort of those high performance channels, really looking at what your KPI is like. You'll know if if you're just looking for social proofing, so views or followers or interactions, then fair enough, go for engagement focused campaigns on X and Meta and things like that. If you're looking at more, you know, click-throughs or more website visits on you want to tell Steam that people are viewing your game and on Steam, then look at those lower cost per click channels like TikTok, even for example, that you can get onto Steam if you don't mind about the end conversion, and things like that. So high converting channels like, as I said, like Google search, for example. If you've got enough of an audience and a community and a presence already, then maybe introduce that as a small amount of spend to mop up those final conversions and things like that. That slowly increases your conversion rates. Then looking at ad formats. Again, we kind of briefly went over what's possible on each channel. So as I say, like cinematic stuff, for storytelling on platforms like YouTube, or like user-generated content for like more short form like TikTok and Reels and stuff. So like fast-paced action and creator-led content for those short form, and then cinematic like awesome stuff for the longer form. And then even like engaging people with the short form stuff first, and we target them with the cinematic, cool, awesome, longer stuff. Could be a way to go as well, to kind of get people to engage with your game more, because at the end of the day, like, people aren't gonna instantly convert on their first viewing of your game, or your first touch point. You're going to need to engage them more than once generally. And remember to A/B creatives as well. Obviously, that's an important factor. Then the last 2 points on these kind of recommendations, cross-platform retargeting. So like, as I said before, people don't really convert on that first touch point. So looking at different touch points, different creatives on different channels is really useful. Don't just rely on one channel in that sense. As I say, a small Google search to hoover up high intent, but if you can't do that, then looking at capturing user data on, like video viewers, post engagers, even followers on Facebook, like capturing, that data on your Facebook ad platform, platform, for example. Even if you've got your own landing page and your own website, putting a pixel on there through Google Tag Manager or something that's fairly easy to do. It's set up for people to do pretty like out the box sort of solution for that. Definitely recommend starting to organize that data as early as possible. So then you can retarget them and use that. As I said, with programmatic advertising cross display, you can even pull Facebook impressions from ads as an audience and put them onto programmatic display ad buying, and retarget the people who've seen your Facebook ads across the ad network, the internet, or websites and blogs. So you can kind of think about how you can actually engage them over more than one touch point. And finally, looking at optimizing kind of influencer spends. So like I said before, like, you can run influencer campaigns, and make sure you can get like the license or even the permission to use them as paid media ads as well. So chopping them up into your paid media ads and throwing them out there. We've seen that perform quite well if it's done in the right way and put forward. And then even negotiating performance-based deals if you have the capacity for tracking, and if you've got your own client or whatever it is that you use. If it's through your own website, then putting a tracking pixel there and a system in place, an affiliate program to be able to track and optimize towards actual performance-based goals. So yeah, essentially that's sort of in short. This is the last slide, and trying to condense it as much as possible. It's kind of looking at that short form video. For user acquisition alongside other aspects of creative in your media mix. Cross-channel retargeting, as I say, don't worry if they don't convert the first time. You can kind of use that cross-channel retargeting to look at how you can convert them on another touch point. And then this is kind of more focused on mobile, but if you are tracking your performance through something like Steam Data Suite or GameSight, for example, not just looking at cost per install, but looking at sort of your lifetime value of your user. If you have, DLCs or in-game purchases, looking at getting on higher value users, not just sort of looking at CPI as well. Again, more focused really in the mobile marketing business, but you can kind of apply that to PC console as well. And then looking at more so influencer ads, not just sort of paid campaign in terms of getting them to create content, but using that content for your paid media campaigns and stuff, and pushing that out as well, but with their permission, is, I think, quite a good performing sort of way of doing it now. So yeah, amongst other things, which I obviously will be on this slide that I can send over, they're kind of some short kind of summaries. And yeah, as this is a kind of just a slide just with my contact details. If you wanted to continue your conversation, reach out. Any more insights, any more, talking. If you wanted to talk more towards sort of CPIs and conversion rates and things like that, we can take a look and maybe talk a little bit more detail. Just had to keep this a little bit more blanket, and so we can start those conversations at least. But yeah, my email, can reach out on Discord as well. It's probably yeah, a way of nudging me to get a quick answer as well. So yeah, or you can just organize a call as well, and we can jump on and have a chat. It's pretty that's yeah, a good way of doing it. But no, thanks so much. I really appreciate you all jumping on and your contributions in the chat as well. I really I look forward to reading them. I hope the chat log stays there after this call because I want to kind of read through them as well. But no, I really appreciate it, and I look forward to kind of talking with you all as well if you fancy a chat about it. So no, thanks so much, and thanks Leo and Yuki as well for having us on board. It's really great for us to be able to talk to your community.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nick. It's been really fascinating stuff listening in. I don't know if you've got time for a couple of questions at all, perhaps.
Yeah, of
I
course.
don't know if it's, yeah. I mean, I think we've had a question in the Q&A there around the sort of the idea of minimum ad spend. So
Mhm.
in terms of sort of budgets. So is there a lower mark for a marketing budget where you think it's just not going to be worth putting the money in order to sort of move the needle, as it were? If you're only going to spend 10K, is that going to be worth it, or is just an extra 5K on top of that going to really make the world of difference? What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of like it's kind of depends what your goals are with that. I'd say like if you have a limited budget of anything, of anything smaller, so we tend to say a minimum of 20. I'll talk in pounds now. If we have a minimum spend of like £20 per audience or per ad set per day, that's probably a good way of sort of looking how much you can scale and how much you can run because you want enough data to be able to learn from and to optimize. Depending again on what your goal is. If it's a purely if you've got a premium game that costs like however much they are now, 80 pounds, £90, for example. If you have a premium game and you're spending like 20 pounds a day on ads, then obviously like, that's not gonna your acquisition costs, obviously your acquisition costs you want them to be lower than 80, but if they're 20 and you're just getting one sale a day, then obviously that's not really worth it. So depending on how much your game costs and what your acquisition cost is, kind of look at how much you want to scale it up and how much times you want to spend on that. If it's at the early stages where you want to generate wish lists and you want to generate awareness, and if you're looking at like lower spend, then even like a £10 or a £20 push on a post or optimized towards engagements and comments and things like that is a good way of like social proofing your game. So what a lot of even if you're looking for a publisher or if you're looking whatever or even for getting a bit of an audience build, if you do some posts that you think are worth boosting, putting even £10 or £20 behind that in engagement focused metrics can really like legitimize the game a little bit when it comes to the community and engagement on that, because these platforms like Meta and X, for example, their algorithms work in terms of pushing organically content that they see is generating a conversation or generating engagement. So if you artificially kind of generate that engagement a little bit to begin with, you can potentially get that to pushing forward. So like I know it's super vague and there's no real right answer towards like minimum spends, but for different strategies you can spend sort of, you don't have to spend a lot. But if you're doing like a wish list campaign, generally rule of thumb, like if you're running a small wish list campaign, for example, £1,000 to it across maybe a week. You want to test between two different channels, or to really know what you want to invest in the future. You can stick with one audience if you want, but kind of optimizing that way. You need something to optimize towards. So we kind of say general rule of thumb, £20 a day per audience, and then obviously spread that, and then you can kind of work it out from there.
Okay, No, that's really, really helpful to understand. And in terms of sort of goals when it comes to sort of marketing, obviously, we're talking about sort of acquisition alongside awareness. I mean, is there a I don't know, is there a trying to think of the best way to put this. I mean, how do you decide between those sort of options as being sort of the aim of a marketing campaign?
Yeah,
Is one necessarily equivalent to the other, or how do you feel about it?
yeah, it's a good point in terms of like, how much you'd allocate, or how much sort of weight you'd put behind, performance and awareness. And I think, without awareness, there's not much performance in that sense. Sometimes, like, you do need an aspect of awareness to generate that, to generate the community, or to know exactly what, that people know about your game. You're not just gonna magically click your fingers and then people are going to be aware of your game and know and download that. Like, some people, sometimes that happens randomly, and an influencer or creator picks it up and it goes viral and everyone downloads it. But more often than not, you're needing to build your community to, like, to allow that to happen. So, like, paid media a lot is used for, like, kind of artificially pushing up the opportunity to get organically popular as well. It's not just, you don't just rely specifically on paid media. You kind of just want to use that as a platform to introduce it to more people, to be able to increase your chance of kind of going viral as such. So yeah, thinking about your awareness strategy is really important, and even getting creators on board from that perspective is probably a good way of doing awareness and performance at the same time. But if you're just looking at generating, views, social proofing your game and stuff, then, I mean, there used to be a rule where it was like 80-20 rule, where kind of it was, that was how you separated it out. But now you have wish list. Like, wish list is essentially a performance metric anyway. You'd say it's less about sort of awareness in that sense. So I think every awareness metric, every awareness sort of thing you do, you always want to point towards wish list, or put, or whatever the CTA is anyway. Um, but yeah, it's a broad spectrum of what you can answer with that. But as I say, if you're performance focused, then stick 80% of your budget towards those performance metrics like wish lists, and then that'll kind of, awareness might take care of itself by organically pushing it up as well, in the media and in creators' eyes.
Absolutely. Okay. A couple more questions then, if you do have time. Do tell me if we'll need to sort of continue this offline. But in terms of sort of measuring return on ad spend for free to play games on Steam, I mean, is this something that you're sort of familiar with? Is there a good sort of tech stack to measure this at all that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I say, I mentioned before, the ones that we work with generally, we work probably with the longest we work with Steam Data Suite, that we've managed to, because you can obviously, like, integrate in-game events within that, and optimize towards that, and revenue-based goals. If you're using something like AppsFlyer, and copying the way that you do it in the mobile, and that's good as well. You can integrate that with different channels. I think Steam Data Suite have now allowed, you can now track Google campaigns with them. They've just got authorization for that, so you can send postbacks to those channels as well. So I'd recommend, what we normally do is run through Steam Data Suite, set up postbacks. So work with team, and to be able to set up postbacks within each channel. I think at the moment, Meta, X, and Google, they accommodate postbacks, which means, if you trigger an event from an ad click from a YouTube ad, for example, that trigger will obviously, that'll trigger the event within the Steam Data Suite sort of client, but also send it back to YouTube, telling it that that was an event that was worth £10, for example. So then it'll sort of feed that data back into those ad channels. So it, like, almost like it powers that algorithm. It kind of sounds like it's like beast that you're, like, powering with its food and with its meat. But that's basically how it is, where the more data you give it, the more conversions that you give it, the kind of more it works for you and the more it optimizes for you. So using something like that, game site I think is the more expensive option as far as I know. But yeah, Steam Data Suite seems to be a more accessible sort of route for free to play as well. Like if you have your own, I don't know if you have your own sort of client or you wanted to integrate your own tracking onto that as well. But if you wanted to integrate like the pixel tracking pixels, I don't know if it's if it's a browser game or if it's a separate game, then you can put pixels on that as well. But I'd say Steam Data Suite is probably the better out of the box sort of options, and checking out something like tracks as well, then it could be interesting. They give a lot of detail in terms of like measurement and things like that. So I'd say that's probably a good option as what we'd recommend.
Okay. No, that's really, really helpful to understand. I think final question then, otherwise we're getting on a little bit. We did touch on it briefly earlier, but I wonder if you'd be able to put just some rough ideas for the audience around sort of conversion on sort of the cost per install and the cost per purchase kind of side of things. Obviously, we've talked about cost per click. Just something sort of just so that we have a reasonable sort of understanding and expectation of what those might convert to would be, even if it's quite a broad range, would be quite helpful. Obviously, things like cost of the game and
Yeah.
actual content and quality, all these things are ultimately going to sort of factor in. But yeah, it'd be helpful to understand sort of your thoughts on that, even if
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
general.
Yeah, as you say, it varies obviously on depending on if it's a free to play game, if it's a premium game, or if it's like a smaller bite sized sort of game in that sense, then cost per install is massively varies. For premium games, we've done some pre-order campaigns for like deluxe versions that are like 90 plus pounds, premium games, or like 60 plus pounds, or it depends on that, but roughly speaking, we've seen cost per acquisition for that. So for example, a game for example, deluxe editions, we've seen CPAs around about sort of £14 or so, or cost per wish lists. As I say, between sort of $1 and between $1 and sort of 4.5. Well, I'm speaking in dollars again, but I'm so used to speaking. But sort of one to 4.5 dollars. I'd say cost per wish list wise, we've seen again, depending on that's just on paid media as well. That doesn't really account for the organic traction that generates, if that makes sense. Yeah, but in terms of acquisition costs, as I say, like we've seen costs for premium games for like £14, for example, which ended up obviously is a positive ROI for what that specific campaign was. Yeah, and it kind of ranges. That's probably that average of what we've seen. But again, if it's a free to play game, we've seen cost per acquisition of like $2, for example.
Mm.
And then obviously you've got to optimize towards in game more valuable users in that sense. But some people just want to generate traffic in the game and get them playing and get them sort of on board. So it kind of free to play games obviously a whole different beast in that sense. Um, but
Absolutely.
as I say, like it's I don't like giving vague answers in that sense. I try and give as much as detail as possible, but I also don't want to kind of say stuff that's not so relevant in that sense. But yeah, it depends on scale and everything like that.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you running over a little bit. I'll obviously, your details are all on the final slide. I'll be making this video sort of available on YouTube and everything. So if people do want to get in touch, I would obviously encourage them to reach out to you. But thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really interesting, especially going through all the different platforms. And yeah, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this and look forward to the next one. All right.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone. And yeah, thanks again, Leo. I really appreciate it. And yeah,
Perfect.
I'll look forward to speaking to anyone who wants to carry it on for sure.